There is something most Christians have never heard of. It is not a parable. It is not a miracle. It is not a verse hidden in the back of the Old Testament that nobody reads. It is a house, a small, fragile, temporary house made of branches and leaves, built every single year by every Jewish family in the land of Israel, including the family of Jesus. It was called a Sukkah, and for 1 week every autumn, the entire nation, rich and poor, young and old, priests and farmers and fishermen, would leave their real homes, their solid stone houses with thick walls and heavy doors, and move into these little huts. They would eat in them, sleep in them, pray in them, raise their children in them, live their entire lives inside a shelter so thin that if you looked up at night, you could see the stars through the roof. Most Christians have never heard of it. Most have never been taught about it, and yet it may be one of the most beautiful, most tender, most revealing traditions in the entire Bible, because it tells us something about Jesus that no stained glass window ever could. It tells us what home meant to him. So tonight, let's slow down. Let's walk back into that world. Let's step inside the Sukkah and understand why, for thousands of years, God asked his people to live in a house that could not protect them from the rain. The story begins in the desert, not in Galilee, not in Jerusalem, in the wilderness, the vast, open, unforgiving wilderness between Egypt and the Promised Land. When God brought the Israelites out of slavery, they did not walk into houses, they walked into nothing, into sand and wind and sky. They had no roofs, no walls, no doors to lock at night. They had left everything behind in Egypt, and they left in such a hurry that they didn't even have time to let their bread rise. So what did they live in? They built shelters, small temporary huts made from whatever they could find, branches, leaves, palm fronds, anything the desert would give them. These were not strong structures. They were not meant to last. They were just enough to block the worst of the sun during the day, and to give a family a small sense of enclosure at night. And for 40 years that was home. 40 years of wandering. 40 years of not knowing where tomorrow's food would come from. 40 years of watching the sky for the pillar of cloud by day, and the pillar of fire by night, the visible presence of God, moving ahead of them, guiding them, telling them when to stay and when to go. They were completely vulnerable, completely dependent. They had nothing of their own. No harvest, no storehouse, no savings, no plan. Every morning they walked outside their little shelters and found manna on the ground, bread from heaven, just enough for the day, not enough to hoard, not enough to store, just enough. And God said to them in the book of Leviticus chapter 23 that they must never forget this. He told them that every year after the harvest was finished, after the grapes had been pressed and the olives gathered and the grain stored safely in jars, when they were feeling full and secure and comfortable in their permanent homes, they had to go outside and build a sukkah, a booth, a hut, a fragile little shelter made of branches, and they had to live in it for 7 days, not as punishment, as remembrance. Because God knew something about the human heart that the human heart does not like to admit. He knew that once we have a roof that doesn't leak, and a door that locks, and a pantry that is full, we start to forget. We forget that we were once helpless. We forget that everything we have was given to us. We forget that our real security was never in the walls, it was in the hand that led us through the desert. The Sukkah was God's way of saying, remember. Remember what it felt like to have nothing but me. Now let's talk about what a Sukkah actually looked like, because this is where it becomes real. This is where you stop reading a Bible verse and start standing inside a living tradition. A Sukkah was not a tent. A tent is closed. A tent is sealed. A Sukkah was meant to be open. The walls could be made of almost anything. Wood, cloth, woven branches, even old fabric stretched between poles. The walls didn't have to be perfect. They didn't have to be solid. They just had to be there, enough to create the feeling of a room, enough to give a family a sense of being enclosed together. But the most important part of the Sukkah was the roof. The roof was called the SUKKAH, and it had very specific rules. It had to be made of something that grew from the earth. Palm branches, willow boughs, leafy branches cut from the hillsides, pine boughs, corn stalks. anything natural, anything that had once been alive and growing. And here is the rule that changes everything. The roof had to be thick enough to provide shade during the day, but thin enough that at night, when you lay down on your mat and looked up, you could see the stars. Let that settle for a moment. God designed a house where you could see the stars. He didn't want the roof sealed. He didn't want his people completely covered. He wanted them to lie down at night and look up through the gaps in the branches and see the same sky their ancestors saw in the desert, the same sky Abraham saw when God told him his descendants would be as numerous as the stars, the same sky the shepherds saw on the night an angel appeared and said, "Do not be afraid." The Sukkah was a house that forced you to look up. Now imagine this in the time of Jesus. It is autumn in Galilee. The harvest is over. The grapes have been pressed, the figs have been dried, the olives are being gathered. The air is cooler now, the light softer, the days shorter, and in every village, in every town, on every rooftop, and in every courtyard, families are building, children are running back and forth carrying branches, fathers are setting up the wooden frames, mothers are organizing the inside, laying out mats, hanging decorations, preparing food, because the Sukkah was not just a religious obligation, it was a celebration. It was the most joyful week of the entire Jewish year. The rabbis called it Zman Simchatenu, the season of our rejoicing. And they meant it. This was not solemn. This was not heavy. This was a party, a week-long, village-wide, family-centered celebration of gratitude and joy. The sukkahs were decorated. Families would hang pomegranates from the ceiling. They would string up clusters of grapes and bright yellow citrons. They would drape the walls with cloth and hang garlands of dried fruit and flowers. Children would make decorations and hang them proudly. The whole structure would smell like the forest, like cedar and palm and fresh-cut wood, and the last warmth of the autumn sun. And then, for 7 days, the family would live there. They would eat their meals inside the sukkah. They would welcome guests, because hospitality during Sukkot was considered one of the highest virtues. They would tell stories, they would sing, they would pray, and at night, they would lie down together on mats on the floor, pull a blanket over themselves, and fall asleep looking up through the branches at the stars. Jesus did this every year of his life. From the time he was a small boy in Nazareth, he would have helped Joseph gather branches. He would have watched Mary arrange the inside of the sukkah, hanging fruit, laying out bread, making the small space feel like home. He would have eaten his meals there, cross-legged on the floor, tearing bread and dipping it into whatever was in the pot. He would have listened to Joseph tell the old stories about the desert, about the manna, about the God who led his people with fire and cloud, and at night he would have lain on his back and looked up through the palm leaves at the Galilean sky, the same sky he had made. Because if you believe what the Gospel of John says, that all things were made through him, and without him nothing was made that has been made, then the boy lying in the sukkah, looking up at the stars, was looking at his own work. That is a thought almost too large to hold. There is a verse in the Gospel of John that most people read without stopping. But once you understand the Sukkah, it will never sound the same again. John 1:14. The Word became flesh and dwelt among us. That word, dwelt, in the original Greek is eskenosen, and it does not mean lived in the way we normally use the word. It means something closer to pitched a tent, or set up a tabernacle, or, and this is the one that matters, built a sukkah. The Word became flesh and sukkahd among us. He moved into the neighborhood, but not into a palace, not into a fortress, into a temporary shelter, into something fragile and open and vulnerable, into a human body, which is, after all, the most temporary shelter any of us will ever live in. Some scholars believe that Jesus may not have been born in December at all. They believe, based on the timing of the priestly courses and other details in Luke's Gospel, that he may have been born during the Feast of Tabernacles, during Sukkot, during the very week when every family in Israel was living in a fragile hut and remembering that God once dwelt with his people in the wilderness. If that is true, and we cannot be certain, but if it is, then the night Jesus was born, every house in Bethlehem had a sukkah outside it. Every rooftop was covered in branches. Every family was sleeping under the stars. And somewhere in that town, in a space not much different from a sukkah, a manger, a shelter, a place open to the sky, a baby was born who was God himself, choosing to dwell in the most temporary, most fragile, most human shelter of all. A body, a life, a few short years on earth, the ultimate Sukkah. But the story doesn't end with his birth. It continues into his ministry. And there is a moment during the Feast of Tabernacles that is one of the most dramatic scenes in the entire New Testament. John chapter 7. Jesus goes up to Jerusalem for Sukkot. The city is transformed. Thousands of pilgrims have come from every corner of the land. The streets are lined with sukkahs, on rooftops, in courtyards, along the walls, everywhere you look. The smell of cedar and palm fills the air. Children are running through the streets waving branches. Music is playing. People are singing the Psalms of Ascent as they climb the steps toward the temple. And inside the temple, something extraordinary is happening. Every morning during Sukkot, a priest would leave the temple through the water gate and walk down to the pool of Siloam, a pool fed by the ancient spring of Gihon, the same spring where Solomon had been anointed king. The priest would fill a golden pitcher with water, fresh, flowing, living water, and carry it back up to the temple in a grand procession. Musicians played, trumpets sounded. The people lined the streets, waving their palm branches and singing. When the priest reached the altar, he would climb the ramp and pour the water into a silver basin on the altar. The water would flow down through the stone, and the people would erupt in celebration. They were praying for rain. They were asking God to send the autumn rains that would water the fields and ensure next year's harvest. They were remembering the water that God brought from the rock in the desert when the people were dying of thirst. The Talmud says that whoever has not seen the joy of this water ceremony has never seen true joy in their life. The celebration went on for 7 days. Each day, the priests circled the altar once with the water. But on the 7th day, the last and greatest day of the feast, called Hoshana Rabbah, they circled the altar 7 times. The intensity built. The singing grew louder. The waving of branches became a roar. The whole temple complex was alive with sound and movement and prayer. And it was on this day, this exact day, this climactic moment, that Jesus stood up in the middle of the crowd and cried out in a loud voice, "If anyone is thirsty, let him come to me and drink. Whoever believes in me, as the scripture has said, rivers of living water will flow from within him." He didn't whisper it. He didn't say it quietly to his disciples. He stood up, in a city full of sukkahs, in a temple full of water and song and prayer, and he shouted it. He was saying, "I am what this ceremony has been pointing to all along. I am the water from the rock. I am the rain you are praying for. I am the living water that never runs dry." The crowd was stunned. Some said, "Surely this is the prophet." Others said, "This is the Messiah." Others argued, the temple guards were sent to arrest him but came back empty-handed. When the chief priests asked why, the guards said simply, "No one ever spoke the way this man does." He had spoken in the language of the Sukkah, in the language of water and harvest and fragile shelters and dependence on God, and the people who lived in that world understood exactly what he was claiming. But there is another moment connected to Sukkot that is quieter, and perhaps even more beautiful. The transfiguration. Jesus takes Peter, James, and John up a high mountain, and there, before their eyes, he is transfigured. His face shining like the sun, his clothes becoming white as light. Moses and Elijah appear and speak with him, and Peter, overwhelmed, terrified, not knowing what to say, blurts out, "Lord, it is good for us to be here. "If you wish, I will put up 3 shelters, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." 3 shelters, 3 sukkahs. Why would Peter say that? Of all the things he could have said in that moment, why did he offer to build huts? Because in Jewish tradition, the Sukkah had become a symbol of the divine presence, the clouds of glory that surrounded Israel in the desert, the visible sign that God was with them, were associated with the Sukkah. When Peter saw the glory of God shining from the face of Jesus, his instinct was to do what his people had always done when God showed up: build a Sukkah, make a place for God to dwell. He didn't understand yet that God was already dwelling, right there in the person standing in front of him. The ultimate Sukkah had already been built, not of branches and leaves, but of flesh and blood. There is a promise in the Bible that ties all of this together, and it is found in one of the most unexpected places, the book of Amos, and again in the book of Acts. God says, "In that day I will restore the fallen Sukkah of David." Not the palace of David, not the throne of David, not the fortress or the kingdom or the army. The Sukkah, the fragile, temporary, open to the sky dwelling. God's promise for the future is not a castle. It is a sukkah, a place where the roof has gaps and the walls are thin and the wind comes through and the stars are visible. A place where there is no pretense of self-sufficiency. A place where the only real protection is the presence of God himself. And in the very last book of the Bible, Revelation chapter 21, John sees a vision of the end of all things, and he hears a loud voice from the throne saying, "Look, God's dwelling place is now among the people, and he will dwell with them. They will be his people, and God himself will be with them and be their God." The word for dwelling place carries the echo of the tabernacle, the echo of the tent, the echo of the sukkah. At the end of the story, God does not build a fortress around his people. He moves in with them. He sukkahs with them. He makes his home not behind walls of stone, but in the open, vulnerable, beautiful space of being together. There is something deeply comforting about the sukkah. It tells us that we don't need as much as we think we do. We spend our lives building thicker walls, buying better locks, filling bigger barns. We worry about security and stability and permanence. We want to feel safe. We want to feel in control. But the sukkah says, gently, kindly, the way a father speaks to a child who is afraid of the dark, "You are just passing through, and that is fine, because I am with you." Jesus knew this better than anyone who ever lived. He was born in a shelter. He grew up building sukkahs every autumn with his family. He stood in the temple during the Feast of Tabernacles and offered himself as the living water. He shone with glory on a mountaintop, while Peter tried to build him a booth, and at the end, he had no place to lay his head, no permanent home, no fortress, no walls. He lived his entire life like a man in a sukkah, open to the sky, open to the people, open to whatever the Father would send. And he was never, not for one moment, unprotected, because the sukkah was never about the branches. It was about the one who stood watch over the branches, the one who sent the manna, the one who led with fire by night and cloud by day, the one who said, "I will never leave you. I will never forsake you." That is the home most Christians have never heard of. Not a cathedral, not a fortress. A little hut made of leaves, open to the wind and the rain and the stars, and inside it, the presence of God. That was enough for the Israelites in the desert. It was enough for Jesus in Nazareth. And if we are honest with ourselves, if we are really truly honest, it is enough for us too. If this story opened something new for you, if it helped you see Jesus not just as a figure in a painting, but as a boy lying on his back in a leafy hut, looking up at the stars he made, please share it with someone who needs that picture. And if you want to keep walking through these hidden corners of the Bible with us, subscribe to Biblical Footsteps and turn on the bell. Every week we take another step deeper into the world that Jesus actually lived in. Until next time, may you find your shelter in him.